So President Trump has recently issued an executive order actually calling for the increase of the production of glyphosate and phosphorus. And RFK Jr. has actually endorsed this. So this is actually going to be we're gonna dive in to the things here, but specifically, I'm going to address of my thoughts of how maybe the best way, in my opinion, to actually phase out and get rid of glyphosate in our country. Something that I'm not really sure is on the table anymore of trying to actually phase that out. Contrast, we want it to increase in production. So we're going to talk about this. Why, maybe my theories of why RFK Jr. is in for President Trump's executive order, all of those things. We're just going to dive in. So, y'all, welcome back to the Grains and Grit. So, this is the podcast of the Grains and Grit YouTube channel, and it's unsifted as an unedited, unfiltered. You just get to deep dive into my brain a little bit more, and I kind of get to share more beyond what I typically do on YouTube, which kind of likes shorter to the point content. So we're going to dive into this. Now, do know this video is coming out, or this podcast is being released February, I believe, the 24th, Tuesday. So on a Tuesday, last week of February, the Tuesday. This Friday is going to be my video, The Truth About Glyphosate and Wheat. So you might want to watch both of those. So I'm going to talk about some of those things in the YouTube video on the Grains and Grit channel, where I talk about the truth about glyphosate, how it is, especially when it comes to like how it involves wheat, addressing some just blatant misinformation out there about it. So good video. I suggest you take a look at that. And I really wish that I could have reversed this order to do that video first and then this podcast. So if you've already watched the video by now and then this podcast, you're in good order. Because it can like anyway, it really doesn't matter, but we're going to just get into slightly different information in this podcast. Like I said, is I'm going to be actually talking more about my thoughts about how we possibly could get rid of glyphosate in this country. Because here are the facts. Okay, so in case you don't know, you haven't watched the other video, you don't know about the things. And this is and in this, just know I'm not condemning anyone politically speaking. I'm just calling it as it is, really. And the facts are that President Trump has signed an executive order he's actually invoking the Defense Act of 1920, the Defense Production Act of 1950 is what it's called, which in essence is a wartime act that tells manufacturing companies, hey, you need to, for example, stop producing cars for just normal domestic use, and we need you to start making tanks because we are at war and our soldiers need those tanks. So that's why we have these defense production acts, because it is for wartime, to making sure that American soldiers have what they need for war, whatever that is, and to help and encourage manufacturers to do that. Okay, we had World War One, World War Two, all the things. This was the 1951 was for the Korean War. So I find it interesting that President Trump has actually invoked that act, because last time I checked, we're not at war. Although there's talks of it with Iran, I do not want war. I'm hoping we're not about to go into war, but I find that interesting that that's the act that he invoked, and I'm hoping that's not prophetical or anything. But that is beside the point. The point is he has now declared that manufacturing companies, need to increase the production of phosphorus and glyphosate for our quote national security, which is just very interesting to me. So that's one thing. But I think what the big shock was when RFK Jr. came out and actually endorsed that. And I'm going to actually quote what he states. So he made a statement to CNBC and probably other news outlets stating Donald Trump's executive order puts America first where it matters most, our defense readiness and our food supply. He said, quote, we must safeguard America's national security first because all of our priorities depend on it. When hostile actors control critical inputs, they weaken our security. By expanding domestic production, we close that gap and protect American families. So that sounds good. But if you also look to see basically the actual executive order and what Trump stated in that executive order, the reason why RFK Jr. stated this is because one thing that Trump mentioned in the order was this is for national security because only one company, and that is Monsanto, now Bayer Monsanto, produces glyphosate. And that if we, RFK Jr. and MAHA, start attacking glyphosate and actually wanting to make it illegal or harder to use, things like that, then that would actually make it a decrease of production here in the United States, which would make farmers seek elsewhere outside of the country to get their glyphosate. Now, a lot of farmers do and are reliant on glyphosate. Now, in the video, I go into how it's actually not used as much as people think on wheat. It is predominantly used on GMO crops such as soybeans, maize or corn, and cotton. That is where majority is used. That's why we call it Roundup Ready soybeans. Roundup is glyphosate. It's a trademark name for glyphosate. That is the product that you buy, the weed killer. And that's why they're called Roundup Ready soybeans. They were genetically modified soybeans so they could be sprayed with glyphosate and survive. But although the weeds and stuff die. Um, so I find that interesting that an executive order was produced for just one company to tell one company that they need to increase their production. The reason why phosphorus is in there is phosphorus is needed to produce glyphosate, so that's why that's lumped in there. And the reason is that because we only have one American company that produces glyphosate, and it does produce, I believe the statistics were 40% of glyphosate production in the world, and which is a large chunk. But if we start telling them they can't do that anymore, then American farmers, they're going to go outside of the US. It's possible then, and then you have the snowball effect, where then our American farmers, what if the cost is higher, which it probably would be for getting something overseas and not domestically, getting something internationally, not domestically, is probably more expensive, especially if you throw in like the tariffs and stuff like that that's going on, which I know that's a whole other ball game. Um, and so, yeah, I can understand like this could be pretty bad. Now, I mean, as far as farmers go that are reliant and depend on glyphosate for their living, basically, they use it for their crops. And that's the main reason why. So, one company stands to benefit from this. And I have theories of why RFK Jr. backed this because let's face it, I mean, all the US government has to do is say national security, and everyone's like, "Yay, because we love America and grandma and apple pie, we must back this, otherwise we are un-American." But I think my opinion is I think RFK Jr. is thinking of the farmers and how if we did just immediately make glyphosate illegal, that would devastate many American farmers. Unfortunately, we've put ourselves in a very difficult position. And this is where this podcast is going to start off. So, all of this is my theory of what we can do, or we possibly could do, and my theories. So, here is the bottom line is farmers now, American farmers, especially those growing GMO soybeans, corn, and cotton, which are in like 90% of processed foods, big, 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 big business, big deal. It's big ag for a reason. And unfortunately, they are very dependent on glyphosate. And just like for anybody who knows about being on prescription drugs, you can't just cold turkey stop those things. Okay. It as bad as say certain many of our prescription drugs are because of side effects and all of those things. And I understand those who are not trust me out. Since my husband was shot, he unfortunately is on prescription drugs and he is relying on it for his pain. And we don't like it at all. And we are trying to get him off of it. But bottom line is that if my husband stopped taking certain medications of his, I mean, he would die. Like as much as we don't like being on it, you don't just cold turkey that. Okay. It is not safe. And I think it's similar with the glyphosate issue, as unfortunately we have built this huge system that it's big ag that heavily relies on glyphosate, and for them to just if you were to just turn around and make that illegal, you you would be devastating these American farms and the ripple effects from this. And all that I'm doing, I'm just thinking this through logically. Okay. I'm not citing some sort of article. I'm just thinking through this logically. If all of a sudden, glyphosate is banned, cold turkey, boom, banned. Then these farmers are probably going to have major crop failure because GMO crops are relying on it, and it's bad news. These American farms, we now don't have these products that are in many processed foods. Unfortunately, the American people are also heavily reliant on processed foods. I believe the numbers now are like 60 to 70% of American adults' daily calories is from processed foods. Okay, let me say that again. About 60 to 70% of American adults. I think it's a little bit higher in children, or about the same. 70% of the daily diet calories that adults consume in America is processed foods. Those processed foods, 90% of them are reliant on these particular crops that are reliant on glyphosate. So we start cutting off glyphosate, crops fail, then we don't have those processed foods. Many people now have no idea what to do. Food scarcity, they believe food scarcity, people don't get their favorite foods, especially if they are addicted to these processed foods with the sugar and all of those things, then you are going to have a big, major rioting type problem. So maybe there is something to this national security thing. I know that's not what he said. I think the ultimate issue is they're saying that, for our troops, hopefully that we're not going to war, but part of the national security is like if the food supply breaks down, how do we get foods to troops, especially if he is planning on going to war, putting boots on the ground. I really hope not, but let's say worst case scenario, and we have that situation, and now we're relying, our the troops overseas or wherever they are, most likely they're overseas because that's where we fight all wars pretty much. Um, and they would be reliant on like the canned foods, the MREs, all that stuff, which is pretty processed foods that's reliant on the GMO crops, thus the glyphosate. So you see the cycle? Like we got ourselves into this mess. We really did. Like we got ourselves into this mess and it's been decades. We are now steeped in it. We are full blown reliant on the prescription drug of glyphosate. And so, no, we just can't cold turkey that thing. However, I think and do believe that there are definitely ways to make steps towards phasing it out. I think education is such a huge part of this, like huge part of this. And we really need to be taking the time. First of all, I think they need to start, and maybe this is something like RFK Jr. Does, partners up with Department of Agriculture, whichever departments do the things. But we need to actually start educating farmers to grow crops that don't use glyphosate. Now, in saying that, I would also add, don't use genetically modified crops, and that's also would have to be something that is just phased out. And Bayer Monsanto is going to be irate, I think is a accurate term because this is a billion-dollar industry, and they are the one company that so Bayer bought Monsanto. Monsanto is the only company that produces glyphosate here in the United States, and 40% of the worldwide glyphosate is produced by Monsanto. So yeah, they're not going to be happy. And considering Bayer spends about $8 million a year lobbying DC, this is a huge battle. I guarantee you they would fight it at all fronts. They do not want it. They got what they wanted by being told by the president of the United States, "Hey, increase production. We order you to increase production." So they definitely got what they wanted in some way. So this would be a fight. I'm not saying that it would be easy, but I do think that education is a huge thing. And then we're just gonna have to like make a big, huge corporation with millions of dollars angry. Should be fun. But let's pretend we're not dealing with a big, huge lobby group. And I do believe that education is huge. We need to educate farmers of, how to be growing crops without glyphosate. And yeah, I'm sure that it's a bit more difficult, but glyphosate is dangerous. I mean, like, there have been lawsuits linking it to cancer. Ironically, RFK Jr. himself was one of the attorneys for that massive lawsuit, that started all this. That the one man sued Monsanto for this years ago, and that was RFK Jr. who was one of the attorneys, and they won. So there definitely are studies out there showing the dangers of glyphosate. I go more into that into the YouTube video, but there are dangers. So, despite farmers possibly not believing them, and I'm not knocking our farmers, we definitely need our farmers. I think government and big corporations have made it very difficult for our farmers. And also, we as consumers have made it difficult because it is based on supply and demand, and we started wanting more fast food, and we started wanting more processed foods, and so farmers responded and growing like one type of Idaho potato and corn for all these processed foods. So everyone shares a little bit of the blame with this, but I think education is big. Starting with the farmers, we need to start teaching them and showing them like here are alternative ways, maybe even alternative farming methods. And I'm pretty sure that people like Joe Salatin would love to do this. That is what they do. There are plenty of people out there to do this, but I think it starts with we start with the farmer, but we also need to educate the American people. Just like with milling grains. It's not enough to say, "Hey, the bread in the store is bad." Okay, great. Well, what do I do? Well, we educate people about, well, here's how to get a grain mill. And these are the different grain mills that are available. And these are the ones that are affordable in your budget. And here's how to use them. And here's the wheat that you need. And here's recipes to use. And here's how to actually use it. And this is what we've been doing for thousands of years. And excuse me. And so education, I mean, that's what I do and what others do here on YouTube and on Instagram is we teach people how to be milling their grains. I can't bake y'all bread. Okay. I can't send it to you through the computer screen. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. And it's the same concept. We need to just educate people, educate the consumers because American people need to stop being lazy. We need to start learning to cook from home with real ingredients, and we need to be willing to do that. And I know, I'm asking a huge, massive feat that, let's face it, I probably will never see. But you and I can make a difference. Start telling people, even if you convert one person and like 50 people convert one person each. Well, that's now 100 people that we have that have decided, I'm going to mill my own grains and bake bread, or I'm going to start not eating at McDonald's every day or buying sodas or all of these processed foods. And eventually it's a snowball effect. And one thing that companies will pay attention to is the bottom dollar. It's how we started getting high fructose corn syrup out of processed foods because the consumer stopped buying it. We started educating ourselves. That's why the whole MAHA movement began. It started with pretty much moms. We were doing our research and it started with us. And that's how we got this massive movement. Now it's definitely wobbling right now, but that's how we got it. It just starts with one person. You don't need a YouTube channel. You don't need to run for office. Ladies, we can do this from home. You just teach the people that and then help them and encourage each other. And then eventually it all snowballs. And then, we end up changing the world. It may not be in our lifetime, but that is these are my thoughts about how I think we can truly make America healthy again. And good news, it doesn't exactly involve government. Because let's face it, the government does not have the best track record when it comes to making things better. Just gonna say it. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter. And I think we can agree on that. It really doesn't matter who is in office. The government just, the worst thing, what they say, the worst thing that you can hear is we're the government and we're here to help. So, um, yeah, that's the thing. It's just better if we learn to do things ourselves and just take care of it. You don't need government to do it. Now, I think with how convoluted and how messed up the system is, the government could offer incentives to farmers to start farming organically. Stop making the process so difficult or maybe even expensive. They already subsidize farmers for corn, for these genetically modified products. Like they're already subsidizing farmers for that. How about we start? I mean, if you're going to subsidize, I disagree with government subsidization handouts, but this is the world we live in. We live where we live. This is reality. So if you're going to do it, can you actually incentivize it for better food, for like real food? Okay, can we at least do that? Similar to how, I disagree with food stamps and don't come at me, but government should not be involved in welfare. It's not how God created government to be. That should be the churches, it should be the people. That's again a whole other mess. But we live in the world we do and we now have it. And so I know like my state of Florida, they're phasing out where you cannot buy like candy and soda, high energy, sugary, high energy drinks, and like packaged baked goods type thing. So like the little Debbie's, they're phasing that out and you're not going to be allowed to buy that with food stamps. So that I'm like, okay, that's good. You don't need candy and sodas, but they still open it up where, you could buy a box cake mix so you can give little Johnny a birthday party if you are on that. So while I wish we didn't have government welfare to begin with, we are here. So let's at least encourage people to buy real food as much as possible. They can still get, freezer pizzas, stuff like that, that is convenient food. But let's at least encourage more real food. You don't have to have sodas. You don't have to have candy. Okay. You can buy other things. You can make your own treats, so that's the thing with that. That's a rabbit trail. Whole other rabbit trail. But that's my biggest take with glyphosate, how we could actually phase it out because I understand. Like I wish it wasn't here. I wish we could go back in time and just never have done this. But that's what man does is we think that we can improve on God's design and we fail every time and we end up really messing things up far more than what it was before and we're not paying the price. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below about this. And let's open up this dialogue because I think step one is having a dialogue, these honest conversations. And then step two is, we start converting people and we start educating people and talking to people, and then that eventually like falls, companies will then follow because people stop buying their foods, or government starts stepping in because people are raising a ruckus like the MAHA movement. And change can happen. Would be shocked if it did, but I have been shocked to this past year with certain things that did happen under this presidency, I will say that. But there you go, y'all. Let me know your thoughts below. I hope that y'all have a wonderful day and be sure to check out that YouTube video coming out this Friday. I will try to remember to link it in the description box to this podcast so that way you can see both sides of the glyphosate issue. And y'all have a great day, and I'll see you later. Bye.